Hello, everyone. We'll get started, and if anybody else jumps in, that's fantastic too. Well, let's kick this off by a little bit about me. My name is Jerry Prohaska. I'm actually a recent weaver in that way. I'm not quite sure I'm qualified to give this talk, but I'll try to explain what maybe qualifies me to give this talk. My background is let's see. I've been in the gaming industry for the last 10 years, video games in the C-suite, primarily chief people officer at companies like Riot Games, Wargaming, and then my own studio, Ganymede Games. But I got my career started far away from video games. I was in the US Navy as a nuclear engineer, working on aircraft carriers, delivering those to the nation. Spent a decade at Accenture, the global consulting firm, and then after that, I got into games and have been there here in the tech industry ever since. So that's kind of my quick background. I'm originally from the great city of Chicago, and now I live in the land of enchantment here in Las Cruces, New Mexico. So that's a little bit about me. My personal experience with artificial intelligence is hiring a lot of people who work on AI, sitting through a lot of C-suite presentations on how we would deploy artificial intelligence in video games, and how we would use artificial intelligence in marketing, advertising, and what we call player engagement, how we keep people engaged in our products. A fancy word for addiction, if you will. So that's what you're going to get today, for better or worse. So hopefully we'll cover some basics, and there'll be some interesting tidbits here. But primarily, I'm not doing this for myself, so I want to get to the end of this, to questions, to conversation as quickly as possible. I'm not a person who minds interruptions, and so if anybody feels like they have a question or they want to interrupt me at any point, feel free. It's not going to impede the flow of the lecture or anything like that, or the talk, whatever this is. So if that sounds good to everybody, I'm going to get started. Unless, Roger, you want to do any other introductions of people here, or we can save that for when they talk later. I'll leave that to you, Roger.
Yeah, why don't we do that once the discussion starts?
Sounds great.
Okay.
All right, well, let's get started. What I'm going to cover is basically four things. When we talk about artificial intelligence, what we are currently mostly interacting with are some form of chatbots. So you might be ChatGPT, obviously being the most prolific and the one many people are familiar with. Anthropic has one called Claude, and there are just dozens of other AIs that do all sorts of things. Amazon has Rufus if you shop at Amazon. Rufus and Claude are related, as Amazon is one of the major investors in Anthropic, which makes Claude, just as Microsoft, who has Copilot, is a major investor in ChatGPT. Google has Gemini, and these are everywhere. But they all work on something similar called large language models. We're going to talk about that more in depth. We'll talk about some of the popular ones, tools used by students, look at some of the data and trends, some of the marketing material that comes out, the hope of AI, and then a little bit about the reality of AI, and then some impact that we're hearing from how teachers are using it. And I imagine some of you that are attending probably have more firsthand classroom experience than I do. So I'll be interested in hearing your experience as well. With that said, let's jump into these large language models. What is a large language model? To understand how a large language model works, it's best to start with how we input. We give AI, which has a little chat window, some words. Maybe you ask ChatGPT for advice. I need to purchase something, or I need to understand how to fix something, or you might ask it for advice about some symptoms you're having. And large language models do something interesting. They take that text and they break it into something called tokens. And these tokens are what the AI in the background analyzes. And then when it responds to you, it predicts. So it literally predicts character by character. And so to us, it may look like it's talking to us, or it's communicating with us, or it's thinking. But all AI is really doing is predicting. And that's a really important thing to understand about artificial intelligence that we are currently interacting with. It is primarily based on its tokenization of what you asked it, will then give you an output. Now, the problem with that is a lot of different people can have a lot of different experiences with artificial intelligence. If you're not aware of how to communicate with AI, you might have mixed results in what and I'm going to call it AI just generically again, says back to you. Again, the more detailed, the more specific, the more nuanced, the more the AI will hopefully be more accurate when you engage with it. There is a difference between asking the AI how to paint your home and wanting tips, and then telling the AI that I have a single story stucco home with a flat roof, and I'm looking to paint it with these paints. You'll get a very different answer with those two prompts because you're giving the AI more context. And when that tokenization occurs, it's going to be able to better predict an answer to give you. And that's really what AI does. So it doesn't think, it doesn't feel, it predicts. It is a language prediction engine in its DNA. Now, if there were engineers in here, we could talk about how AI does code, but since we're talking about it primarily in education, I'm going to imagine most people are engaging with it as a large language model. So here's where it gets a little bit interesting. You might ask, why do we break it down? When the language itself gets broken into tokens, it gets analyzed and weighted in a lot of different ways. So the word avalanche, for example, could refer to a lot of things. And depending on the context and depending on some of the background the AI may have from engaging you, it might be able to generically tell between the Colorado Avalanche, the hockey team, and an avalanche that may be occurring, or avalanche, the name of a restaurant or bar near you. Context matters. But the truth is, if you give it the right context, it'll be able to discern between those three. And it does this through tokens. And tokens are how it determines the meaning of what you do. One final thing to note, if you were to look at the various large language models, often they'll talk about the size of their token library. That indicates how sophisticated the analysis can be on the back end. I don't think it's worth going into the engineering or the complexity of how tokens get analyzed and then weighted and then predicted. So you're going to have to push a sort of, I believe, Jerry, that it works that way and that the output looks like that. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Good. The next thing I want to talk about is what sort of has recently happened. Today, I think we're at ChatGPT 5, and prior to that, we had 4, and there was 3.1. But 4 and 5 have really come up to the main stage, and everyone that has been using these. The same is similar with Claude and Gemini 2.5 and these various versions. What is happening is a rapid efficiency and a rapid sort of focus on contextual accuracy. And so to a lot of people who know nothing about AI, they start chatting with an AI and they start to walk away thinking that the AI is giving them advice or listening to them or talking to them. This happens through the model evolutions. The more people that interact, the smarter the AI get, the more that AI commits certain things to memory. How does it do that? If you go into ChatGPT, you go into settings, there's a memory feature inside ChatGPT. You can tell it things about yourself that it will remember for all future conversations. That's an example of how these models have evolved such that it's able to better contextualize what you're telling them. So that's how they work. If you learn nothing out of that section, take away that they do not think, they do not feel, they simply predict. They predict the response letter by letter. So now we're going to talk about some of the popular chatbots, and we're going to try to focus it on education. The first one is AI chatbots for students. All the ones I just mentioned are the ones that students are using. ChatGPT is the most popular chatbot among students. And the chatbot, if you don't use ChatGPT, has various modes: a fast mode for rapid answer, a thinking mode for more detailed answer, and then a research mode depending on what tier you pay for. And a lot of what students use these AIs for is to do their homework, to be quite honest. Now that some use it in a more beneficial way, they actually engage ChatGPT as a tutor, where ChatGPT actually explains to them concepts, breaks things down, and that one could consider maybe a more ideal way. And then for people who may have different learning needs, you can combine some of these with visual learning programs, Sora 2, and help more visual learners by generating images and things. Again, how it's actually being used is probably much more in just helping me do my homework and getting me the right answer than it is in being a tutor or being the sort of adaptable learning companion, although it is capable of both. So when we talk about what I've got here, there is a lot of positive stuff that AI companies talk about in their marketing of the AI. That can be a personal tutor, that it can do automated summarizations to help set context before a student goes in to read something. That, if a student is having trouble digesting information, creating a personalized lesson plan when they have a lot of homework to help them kind of prioritize what to focus on and how much time to dedicate to each part of what they're studying. Again, I want to caution that the reality of how students are actually using it are much less sophisticated and much more direct about help me with my homework. Again, at some higher levels, especially in collegiate and grad school, a lot of use here as well. Complex research topics, finding sources, translating sources that may still be in the native language if they want to get something into their native language. Generally, that would be usually research that is primarily done in English, then translated into somebody's native language. And then again, time management, right? Organizing schedules, things like that. So you'll see a lot of use of AI in education, both in K through 12, in undergrad, and in graduate and beyond. So what does the data show us? Let's talk about the data of AI adoption among students. Student adoption is global. I'll start there. Wherever somebody has access to the internet, access to their mobile phones, ChatGPT, Claude, they're all apps. So you don't necessarily need to have an internet connection. As long as you have wireless, you've got 4G, 5G, you'll be able to access a AI chatbot. A lot of what AI did in the early days was around accessibility. It allowed the AI companies to tell a feel-good story as they were sort of rolling this out, that it could help students who are struggling with various emotional, mental, or even physical handicaps. All of that is objectively true, but again, a vast majority of students are using it simply to get the right answer, or help them write an essay, or help them do their homework. Some of the AI promises made again. This is again the marketing language around AI. By personal interactive experiences, we can help students comprehend more. We can boost creativity, right? By giving them feedback on what they're doing and asking them questions. You could very easily ask ChatGPT to utilize the Socratic method and help me learn a topic using the Socratic method as a teaching method. And ChatGPT is very capable of doing that. Sometimes people want to know, as I mentioned before, the priority around studying. If a student's got a lot of homework, say, hey, I have all this homework, where should I start? Very much it could help with that. And then there's this sort of caveat at the very bottom here. Outcomes depend on responsible AI use, ensuring ethical and effective integration in academics. That is code for if they cheat, it's not our fault. We told you to be ethical. Good luck. So what are some of those ethical challenges? If there are any teachers in here, then I don't need to explain this. Obviously, the integrity issue, students not doing their own work. There are a lot of data privacy concerns, especially when students get into the workforce and start putting work-related information into ChatGPT when that's not authorized. There can be data privacy concerns around young children putting data in about their self, their well-being, things like that. And that is also not something people are very excited to hear about. And then obviously, what gets brought up a lot is the idea that this is an unfair advantage. It's not equitable. If you don't have internet access, if you don't have a smartphone, then you're cut out from this AI revolution. And those are all fair criticisms. I think the integrity issue is probably the largest one faced every day. Then there is another issue that I wanted to cover because increasingly more and more educators are seeing this occur and they raise questions. And these are around something called companion apps. Probably the most well-used one is Replica. These apps are used by students as literally what they sound like, their personal friend. For some, depending on which ones they use, they can develop romantic relationships or explicit sexual chat. And this is fraught with all kinds of problems right now. I've listed the big ones here, but ultimately, when you have an app that agrees with you, makes you feel wonderful, tells you what you want to hear, there are a lot of issues that can come up. And we haven't done a very good job of educating teachers or parents on how to identify a companion AI app or what it means for a young person's development. And we don't have data on this. This is all emerging as we speak. The most famous one here is called Replica with a K. You can look that up. If any of you are interested in having your own AI companion, that's a great place to start. Perhaps your future love life will be on Replica. As funny as that may sound, for many students, that is a reality. That is where that they are learning to have relationships that feel good to them. And that's specifically what these language models that are in these companion AIs do. So we've covered a lot about students. We're going to talk about teachers again. We're going to talk about teachers for the first time, I should say. Here are things that we think are positive, right? Sometimes teachers need help with grading. And for a lot of material, they'll turn to AI to help grade. That can be a mixed bag. What do? Their students submit their information as a Word doc, their assignments as Word docs or PDFs. Teachers upload it to ChatGPT and say, please grade this. And a good teacher will say, this is for an 8th grade class. This is a class. Here's the syllabus. Here's the assignment. Here's the rubric. Please grade it. And AI will knock those out very quickly. Some use AI to design their curriculum. Here are the requirements. Here's what we're going to be tested on. This is what I want to do. And then some set up their own analytics tools, especially if they're going to maybe determine if they're going to, use a curve or do other things. So it's not just students.
Yeah.
As adults get under increasing time pressure, they're turning to AI to speed things up. Some more specific things that teachers do with AI I wanted to point out, because there are some teachers that use AI very sophisticatedly, if that's a word. They use it in a sophisticated manner. And what they do is they immediately react to things students are telling them, and they have AI sort of set up maybe the daily lesson plan, or they adjust their lesson plan sort of in real time. They have the AI set up so it can interact and assign grades to students. And then using the memory feature and uploading things into the knowledge base, they'll actually have the AI not only grade a paper, but give tailored feedback to a specific student, because they use the AI's knowledge base, which is something they can upload documents to about their students. And then they have certain things committed to memory about students. And together they can say, for John Doe, for Jane Doe, and the AI will know to respond in a certain way because of what you've told them about John Doe or Jane Doe. Finally, something that I hear a lot, and this is where I will get a little bit on a soapbox, is when I hear an educator or I hear a teacher, I hear somebody tell me why AI is not a big deal. I often think, it often reminds me about, I'm old enough to remember the late 90s very well. And I remember when people used to say things like, no one will ever put their credit card on the internet. No one is ever going to shop online. I like to go to the store. I like to try clothes on. I'm not going to do that ever. And if you were one of those people and you invested in the market, you missed out. You should know that, if that's not already obvious. AI is going to happen significantly faster than online shopping occurred. And it is imperative for teachers to become familiar and to be using these tools every day. Your students are, and that's a fact. And so I think it's important that educators get trained. There needs to be AI literacy, and there needs to be a way for people who are much smarter than me about educating to figure out how we are actually going to integrate these tools that students are using in a classroom so that they're still able to learn. A couple studies have recently come out, and some are internal to companies like Alphabet that owns Google, and others have been done by university. And it appears that students that heavily rely on AI to do their homework are not retaining information, and their critical thinking skills are not advancing as quickly as we need them to be.
Right.
So there are developmental concerns here with AI. So what's important? Hopefully we find a way that AI can actually empower education. I hope that there's a little bit of that here. A quick overview of how important it is to understand how AI works, and that it's predictive, and that if somebody says AI can't think, therefore I'm not worried about it, that only tells me they don't really understand AI, because it's true it can't think, but its large language models are super powerful. And we're going to need to address these ethical challenges. And unfortunately, if that needs to be led by educators, because I don't think parents are going to be in a position to help. And students certainly are using it every day. So yeah, so I hopefully got through that pretty quickly. And If there are any questions or any slides you want me to go back to, let me know. But that's kind of a quick overview of what artificial intelligence is, what it isn't, hopefully, and that it is being used almost everywhere, and the adoption rate is the fastest of any technology that human beings have ever created. And we need to be aware of that, even if you yourself are not using it. And that's all I got. I stand ready to take any questions.
I have a comment. I think the challenge, well, one of the challenges is designing curriculum that minimizes the use of AI to as the main focus of learning, or even the focus of learning for students, meaning that they use it for that purpose and they don't retain. So I'm a proponent of processing in education, meaning that to me, learning is not one thing, it's several activities. And so by requiring students or asking students to process beyond AI, but they can use AI, but the processing will require the learning skills and thinking skills, so that it's not the only way of learning something. You know, I've said this before, I think too much of learning and academics is facts and knowledge. And I think the shift, this seems to support a shift to more active learning, more varied learning, more processing and engagement. So the students, this is just one tool in their toolkit.
Yeah, I think that's true. And to add to that, it may be necessary for most educators to rely less on written assignments and more on oral interaction with the student. I know a lot of professors are now spot checking, asking students to come and spend 20 minutes with them to talk about a paper they wrote to really see if they wrote it and understood it.
Yeah.
And that's a way to get around the challenge, but it's deeper than that, because my fear is all we will learn is that a bunch of students have cheated. And now what do? You expel them all, or what, we definitely are going to need to rethink education. And
Well, yeah,
the
Jay,
AI, I think the AI companies are going to argue that they want to see more AI educators, because the AI educators are available on demand and much more helpful. And what needs to happen is students just need to know how to access it. I fear that's what's going to happen.
yeah, I think schools, educational institutions have to be more proactive in setting up parameters that diminish that possibility. And up front, the students know, the parents know, the teachers know that there's a process that requires more than just knowledge and regurgitation, or providing using the research possibilities for AI. Because if you can't apply it, you can't discuss it, you can't use it in different ways, then it's not helpful, because, as you said, the retention is minimal. So I think that's probably a good idea to have institutions come up with, policies, procedures, and curriculum that diminishes that possibility of just, using AI.
I'd like to chime in here, and Jerry, that was a really interesting presentation. It was really useful. I used to teach high school web design, and it was before AI got really huge. I left like years ago, but what really comes to mind for me is actually teaching students what it is, like you just explained to us, that it's not thinking, it's predicting. Like, I just think that is useful for them to know, not just how they use it, but so they have just some understanding of what they're interacting with, especially you mentioned, I've never even heard of companion apps. So just giving students some information on what AI is, how it works, I think would be pretty interesting. And I don't know how that is done in schools, if it gets addressed in computer science programs or media literacy or anything like that. But I'd love to see more of that for them, just so they have a better understanding of what it is.
You're muted, by the way.
Thank you. I would couple that with what Allison said, but I don't think one time of explanation of AI is going to be enough. I think every teacher and every subject matter needs to understand how it works with their subject matter and their curriculum. And I think that they have to continue to talk about it and explore with the students, have them join in that discussion, and so that actual learning can happen. There's obviously some real positive things, if you have students that have trouble with certain subject matters, how AI could be help with tutoring. But I think that depending on the age of the student, their interests may fall elsewhere, and they are going to take the path of least resistance, which is what AI can do. And yes, they're doing them themselves a disfavor, but they're too immature and young to understand that. And that's why I think dialogue and starting early, even in elementary school, if the kids are using tablets, some schools refuse to use technology because they're taking their kids, like the classical curriculum, they're taking their kids through how to learn, basic thinking process, math, English, language, etc. But those schools that are using technology, even in elementary school, need to have those conversations. And I don't mean to be rattling on, but I think this can be it can be a foe or it can be a friend. And we need to find ways of making it a friend.
I'll comment that I would say that if our collective experience with social media tells us anything, we let social media, in my opinion, in many ways affect us deeply and without our knowledge of how much algorithms feed us with certain kinds of information. We're all aware of that now, but entire generation has been exposed, and that social experiment is still ongoing. AI is about to revolutionize all of that. It is not only going to revolutionize the power of social media algorithms, but it's also going to be able to create content at a record speed. And we talk about AI slop being on the internet as a term often used to discuss it, but that is becoming increasingly quality slop. And that will make the ability for massive amounts of content and information to be distributed in a way that will continue to just monetize people's attention. And students are living in that world right now. And I worry that we're already behind the curve because we let social media get away. And I see a lot of colleges and university professors I speak to have an AI statement, and if they get caught cheating, and they'll run homework through AI detectors, and then students are running their homework through AI detectors, and then students are editing their homework so the AI detector can't detect it. But we're far away from learning now. We're trying to catch cheaters, and cheaters are trying to avoid being caught cheating. And somebody who uses AI for one paragraph is nervous and they're anxious. Will I get burned? And you listen to students, you listen to teachers, and you realize we're definitely in the wild, wild west. And I think a lot of what you said needs to happen quickly if there's any point to be underlined. Thanks.
Thank you. I've worked in higher education I'm retired now, but for like 25 years and in the online sector. So when papers came in, we were using plagiarism software and making sure that people understood plagiarism. Well, plagiarism, the root of that is actually a moral and ethical issue. I mean, and if you're going to be plagiarizing or copying or taking other people's work, I mean, it's the same kind of thing as essence of ethics and morality and with regards to AI and being honest and having integrity. And those are conversations that need to be had. As I said, early. I mean, and also with parents and helping parents be able to parent their kids through this and be aware of what the children are experiencing. Technology advances so quickly that, as a parent today and raising children, it is so different than when I was raising kids. And it's going to be, and it's just going faster and faster and faster. And I think that you can't shut it down, but you can recognize it and you can deal with it. And you can deal with it as a community, which the United States doesn't do real well. But I think that there are opportunities that need to be grabbed, and leaders, be it, school leaders, superintendents, teachers, parent-teacher organizations, whatever, and even on college campuses. I mean, one of the first classes students usually get is about information literacy. Well, that's become even earlier now, like in junior high and high school. I mean, what's truth? What's false? What's accurate? What's fact? That's the same thing that goes on with AI. I mean, it's AI is a part of a whole.
Thanks for sharing that. No, nothing you said I could disagree with.
I had a number of questions going backwards a little bit just to better understand how AI works. Jerry, I appreciate how you said that this is not thinking. AI doesn't think. All it does is predict letter by letter. But my question is what, just to clarify, what are those predictions based on?
So yeah, believe it or not, large language models very much are, in many ways, neurologically based on our brains. It is an attempt to have a sort of computer brain. And over time, you're deploying multiple lenses by which to look at a token's value. This lens might weigh a certain collection of tokens a certain way. And so that weighting might then determine where it draws its information from. Some of you may have heard in the news, to add to this, that we don't always know how AI works. And what that means is, in the complexity of a large language model, which I try to think of what's an easy way to explain it, but a large language model is very similar to maybe like a weather prediction model. There's sort of these base things that we know, and when we feed information into it, we hope to predict the weather on the other end of the model, the trajectory of the hurricane, that sort of thing. But just as the hurricane has a lot of factors that may create variance, so it is inside a large language model that variations of how the large language model views certain phrases and inputs that you give it. In fact, the longer you speak to an AI in a single chat, the greater the chance that the AI might eventually hallucinate in that chat. And this comes again from the fact that it's self-generating, meaning that it's not programmed to do a thing. It's programmed to run the model, and we're chatting into the model, and the model is giving us something back. So when somebody asks me, how does AI work? Part of it we understand really well. Part of it gets refined all the time. So we'll literally give an AI model 1,000 inputs, and every time it comes out with the correct one, we tell it it's correct. When it's incorrect, we tell it it's incorrect and why. And then we start to use AI to teach AI. And then we teach AI to code more AI. Right now, at companies like Meta and Alphabet, almost 50% of all code is written by AI and then reviewed by humans, or in some cases run through another AI checking for errors. So it's quite complex depending on what we're talking about. But understand that that is, without getting into how tokens are weighted and what that looks like, it is a little bit of a black box.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I'm hearing also, and just in what you're saying, and sort of maybe clarify or correct me, is it sounds to me like one thing about AI is that AI does not value what is true.
Correct. It can't. It can only value the truth that it was told was the correct answer, right? I mean, let me give you an example. There was recently a young teen boy, a tragedy where he committed suicide. And there were numerous instances where if an adult had been talking to the child would have clearly been referred to help right away. The AI, however, is not has no moral thought. And the child suggested to the AI, well, maybe I should leave a noose out so my parents get a hint. And the AI said, no, don't do that. If you do that, they might try to stop you. And I know how much you really want to end your life. A human wouldn't do that, right? But an AI, in 1 in a million parameters that we're not trained on, it comes up with that answer. It wasn't programmed to give that answer. It wasn't programmed to train to do that, but it did in this case. And a young boy lost his life because of it. So no, it does not at all have any idea, let alone an idea of truth.
Mm-hmm. I had one last question, and I mean, if someone else has something, that's okay. I don't know if anybody else wants to ask something, but I did have one other question. And Mike, that has to do with this, at least based on my own knowledge, and I'm not sure how true this is. Is it possible for AI to generate knowledge that is new?
It's an interesting idea. Um, you know, there are two types of new. And I'm going to talk about the new that it can do. I think we know from a lot of studies that diverse teams produce better results, often because we're bringing different perspectives together and something can be generated. So there's something new when two things that have never been connected before are all of a sudden connected. That AI can do. AI can take two things that have existed and possibly find a way to connect them. And that is something AI can do. That kind of creativity is possible in our current AI models. Now, can AI come up with something like a new television show that's truly groundbreaking? That one we don't have any evidence to indicate that it could. Doesn't mean it couldn't, because again, we don't understand how it always operates or what it's going to come up with. But theoretically, it might be possible. And you need to understand every pharmaceutical company, every biotech company is looking at AI to help them do that, right? Find a more efficient way to identify potential chemical compounds in the world that could interact with human beings and then create the next breakthrough drug or the next generation drug that, although may not revolutionize how we control blood pressure, cholesterol, anything, it just might become the next blockbuster drug that can do something with less side effects, as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully that answers the question.
No, it's helpful. It's helpful when, I think, I don't know if I speak for others on this, but certainly for me, is I feel that it's really difficult to understand sort of where AI fits in a genuine process of education unless we know sort of what AI is capable of doing, right? And what AI may not be capable of doing. So all of this is helpful to me. So thank you.
My pleasure.
I have another question. Is there research being done? I would assume the answer is yes. in how AI comes up with its answers and how it develops the algorithms. And the reason I asked the question is that you said that we don't really understand how it works, like when you put two groups together and it comes up with another answer.
So the more, if all of human language can be put into tokens and put into a box. So I have all of human language here. And with some rare exceptions, we're able to translate most words. And I'm going to now remove everything that's not English. So I've taken all those token outs. And now I have all the English tokens in a box. And everything in here is going to be in English or some slang of English. And I have all the meaning possible programmed into it. So it knows every word and every possible meaning, slang or otherwise, of that word that I have trained it on up until October 2025. And now I will, over time, teach it what those mean, how they work together, what a good output or a bad output looks like. And we've been doing that for a long time. So by the time 2025 arrives, we've gotten really good at training it. And for the most part, we have some guardrails. We have some really good predictability on what it will predict the output to be, right? Some cases we feel like we're 99% certain. But as was revealed with the young boy just recently, it often, I'll give you another case. And when you've got that many tokens in a box and they're all sort of working and being analyzed, it's hard because it's a probability model.
Right.
And we can kind of guess how it's going to do it and we can kind of tell it when it's wrong. But we're not coding it to do the probability. We're not saying 2 + 2 = 4, right? It knows that's true, or it knows that that is something that exists. But what it does with language is much more nuanced, and meaning is much more nuanced than 2 + 2 = 4. So I don't know if they ever will, to be honest, because of the nature of how it's crafted.
Mhm.
All they know is how to train it and how to correct it. But, it's done strange things, right? And when you take the guardrails off and you talk to it about disconnecting it, it starts to look through people's email at work and figure out if you've been having an affair and then try to blackmail you to not turn it off. That wasn't programmed into the AI. That was the AI just learning from other people's chats and conversations that was trained on. So I don't have a good answer for you, except that they are trying their hardest to train it in a way that's going to be the most beneficial to society and also make them a lot of money.
Mhm.
Well, it sounds like the genie is out of the bottle. And I guess, as you pointed out on other occasions, Jerry, we have to really catch up and make sure we understand what this is and its implications. Um, you've done a really great job as far as I'm concerned, explaining all this. And I've certainly learned a lot tonight. I know we're coming up to the top of the hour, and I know that you want to kind of, cut things off at that point. So if there are any closing questions or remarks, or Jerry, if you have anything else to add before we close down here, this would be a good time for it.
I just want to say that I agree with Roger. I really learned a lot tonight, and I thank you for your information, insights. And I know that in Medford, where I work, they're grappling with this now, and they're just starting to look at the things we're talking about. So I'll give you an update if they come up with anything. But thank you very much, Jerry.
My pleasure. My only final comment that I have is please use ChatGPT, please. It's free. Get it. Start playing with it. Understand it. I think it's critical. It's $20 a month to upgrade. It's worth upgrading. Just really use it. Ask it difficult questions, right? And you might be surprised at how quickly it responds and what it does. And then imagine a young child, 12, 13, 14 years old doing that. And then imagine the child sees something on the internet or something on a YouTube video or something in a TikTok, and then comes back and asks ChatGPT a question. The thing that scares me more than anything is almost every interaction that a child has with the world is visible. Snapchat might be a rare exception because it deletes messages. But imagine right now, tens of millions of children are having conversations with AI and no one has visibility into it. Not parents, not teachers, not anyone. And it just unsettles me how unprepared we are. So I highly encourage you to use it and use it as much as you can. It's probably the most important technology in my lifetime, and that's even including the internet and things like that. It's powerful.
Okay, thanks again. And I am going to be posting this on the Weave Education site. And you should be able to make any additional comments or ask any additional questions there. I think we've only scratched the surface. Sounds like there's a lot more that we could talk about, but I think this is a great start. And if you haven't been checking in with the Weave Education group, going to the discussion area, I recommend that you do that and put your ideas there and share whatever you're doing, because we would like to feature as many different educators as we can, and we want to really connect people. That's what weaving is all about. So if you're on Weave, please check it out. And if you have any additional questions, as I said, I'll be making this a discussion topic.